Okay, well, welcome back, everybody, to a Glory podcast, and good to be here with you. And again, thank you all for watching these podcasts, and we hope that they're helpful to you and that you can get some good information from them. And this is a series that we've been doing here recently called All About Worship. We've actually done 3 episodes. This will be the 4th episode, and I really encourage you to go back and watch some of those previous episodes, and just kind of briefly, the first one was with Adam and me, and we kind of set this all up and took a big look at kind of an overview of what worship is and the biblical definition of it, and we used Romans 12:1 and discussed that. So I really encourage you to go back and look at that. Then Jonathan Smothers and I kind of took an in-depth look at actually corporate worship, and then what our worship looks like here at Glory Fellowship and things that we do in our culture. And so just some behind-the-scenes stuff that I think people would be really interested in knowing. And then the 3rd episode, Michelle and I started looking at the building blocks of worship and teaching that to our children, going from our infants all the way up to 6th grade. So really encourage you to go back and look at those episodes and watch those. But today we've got Philip Williams with us. Philip is our youth pastor here at Glory Fellowship, if you didn't know that already, and does a great job. And there's also a previous episode of one of our podcasts of What's Happening at Glory, where Philip and we really just dig into what goes on in the youth, and so a lot of details about that. So I encourage you to go back and look at that as well, because what we're focusing on today is worship and what that looks like in the youth department. And so go back and look at that other podcast with Phil and I, and you'll see, hear some details about the youth there. But Phil, glad you're with us today, and let's just jump right into this for time's sake. Like I said, Michelle and I had talked about what worship looks like as far as, teaching that, modeling that, starting with our infants, we and she talked about some really good stuff with that. We talk about discipleship starts at birth. And
sure.
So anyway, went up through that into the 6th grade. And so what we want to do today is jump off from that up into the youth. Youth is 7th through 12th grade, and just kind of talk about some things there, and kind of how you teach that, how it's modeled, just all of that.
Sure.
So I know you got some things, so I'll just let you start, and then we'll just kind of have a conversation about it.
Yeah, well, obviously the big thing when you get into 7th grade is you're developing into the type of personality, the type of human you're going to be. Your things are working different around that time, and you're growing up and getting ready for some of our kids, getting ready to enter their adult life, and we're trying to transition them in a way that's godly and pleasing to Him. And one of the ways we do that when we talk about worship is, like, as you guys have talked to, it's not worship is what I do every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's how I experience this life and live in obedience to God and live a life worthy of the gospel as He calls us to. And that's what my true and proper worship is.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the ways that we've done that is a few years ago we went to a camp setting, and I really don't remember who said it, but I know that it stuck with me. One of those things that really resonated, that has become a constant cry in our youth space to talk about. And the guy that was speaking was talking about how we are very tempted, and most of us do, rank or prioritize the things in our life. And that can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could say, well, God's first in my life. Hopefully that's true. And then you say, well, maybe it's my family after that, and it's my for adults, it's work; for kids, it's school; and then after that, there's extracurriculars, and then there's this and hobbies and whatever. And you keep going down the list. But the guy was saying that's really not a healthy biblical way to look at priorities in your life. Real worship is that God is not number one in your life only. He's number one in every aspect of your life. So yes, He's number one above all things. But then below that, what you're talking about, when you start talking about your family, well, God is with you and should be woven through everything that you do with your family. It ought to change the way you have relationships with them and with other people. It ought to, you're obedient to your parents because that's worship to God. You do what's right and good with your family and help and love and serve them because that's what God is doing, in you. And then you think about the next thing. You think about your other relationships you have. You think about your school setting for our youth kids. Well, their worship is living a life worthy of the gospel while I'm at school. It's bringing up His name. It's praying on purpose for people. It's letting them know that I'm doing that. That's true on the ball fields. I've been reading a lot lately about that, about how really our job as pastors that is a sort of a newer thing that we're really having to reframe our minds around is people are busy and our youth kids are busy. There's all kinds of stuff going and competing for the time that they spend with the Lord. So our job is to try to teach people how to disciple their children and how to disciple one another and become better disciples in the middle of everything that's going on.
Right.
Like, how can I had a conversation with a couple of our youth kids that are super into volleyball, that's a big part of their life, spend a lot of time doing it. And I'm like, well, how can we leverage that for the Lord? How can we use this time to worship, to show other people that we're worshiping, to spread gospel seeds? And so anyway, all that to say is that the constant theme of our youth group and the constant theme that ought to be of our church is like we're trying to do that everywhere. Worship is not a Sunday thing. It's not a Wednesday night thing. It's a everyday thing. So that's the common thread through everything that we do when we're speaking of worship. So,
yeah, that's a great word there. And the sooner or earlier that we can teach our kids and our youth about, to not compartmentalize God, because, there's so many adults that do that.
Sure.
And the earlier we can teach them that frame of mind, and that concept of that, to not do that God is not just a Sunday thing. Worship's not just a Sunday thing, and like you're saying, it's prevalent in all aspects of their lives, then the better off they're going to be as they get older. So that's a good point there. I know it's tough too, man, and we, we've talked about this several times, is that, when you're that age, image is a big deal,
no doubt.
And it's how, and you're worried about it in so many different levels, and now social media has just, made that, just magnified that by I don't know what, but anyway, and so, one of the things, what are some things that y'all do that you talk about with that, or how you teach, kind of that?
Well, one of the things that we try to emphasize on that is our identity is in Christ, above all things. And we try to put them in positions to where they grow in their confidence in the faith. When I recognize this is the number one thing, it puts all those other things that I want and desire in order. And that's what Adam just talked about in the series that we had about financial stuff.
Yeah.
And we did that stuff upstairs too, but a lot of ours, as we were talking about it, we moved it from speaking financially, which we did some of that, to thinking about image. And when I put myself in right frame of mind where my number one desire and goal is to be about the mission and put kingdom first, well, then it makes me think not less of myself, but makes me think of myself less.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And I get less concerned about the things of this world and what other people think, and think more concerned about what God thinks and about what the people who truly love me think. And so it helps us to order that correctly. And, we talk a lot about Ephesians 1, about how we were chosen and called, and God, it was His good pleasure to do that for us. And when you understand those things, it changes the way that you view everything. And hopefully that means your image too. So
yeah, that's good. Well, let's kind of move on to another point here. One thing that we've talked about, and that you have talked about since day one, that you were hired to serve in this position, is the fact that we want the youth to not feel like, but know this is their church too. They are a part of this, and one thing that Michelle and I talked about this too, that we love about our church, and that we got to continue striving. We have to be intentional about it. We use that word intentional about a lot of things, and it's very important. It's not the kids over here, the youth here, and the adults here. It's all of us together. It's everybody's church. And so, we've got to develop leaders
Right.
that are going to, move up into the future. And that's our kids and our young people, and I joke about it all the time. There's going to be a time when I'm not walking up on that stage anymore leading worship.
A long time from now.
Yeah. So, but we do have a youth worship band.
Right.
And I was so glad that we were able to get that started. I think that is a very important thing. But let's talk about that for a few minutes.
Okay.
I'll let you just kind of go with that.
Yeah. So first and foremost with that, I want to be clear that I am ignorant as the day is long about music and about music preparation. But God has blessed us and gifted us with people that are talented in that way and are using those gifts for the Lord. And so we've had several people that have stepped into those roles and helped me to be able to be present, and that's really my only job in those scenarios, is to be present and give them space to grow in their leadership in that, and just sort of do the behind the scenes stuff. But what happened with our worship band, with our youth worship band, is we really had a blessing of getting a couple of girls in our youth group that are now both a part of the adult praise band.
Yep.
Emmy Grace and Anna Kate Webster, and Anna Kate still helps our youth band and tries to lead them and develop their skill and their love for worship. But they came in and were sort of worship in a box, because they were so talented and were so passionate about it. And their dad, Mark, helped us to kind of establish some practice stuff as we were getting some other members included in the band. And so they helped us at first. And really what it did from day one, when we started adding music and worship on Wednesday night, we're silly up there. It's ridiculous for the first 15 minutes, before I get ready to come preach to the students. And it helps us transition from, hey, we just had a great time together, but let's get our minds right about what we're about to do.
Yeah.
We're about to worship the Lord who made everything, who created me, who chose me, who sent his son to die on the cross for me. Let's get our minds right about that. And so it definitely has helped us in that way to transition to that more serious time.
Yeah.
But they practice, and they've done this for years. They practice every week. We used to do it on Sunday afternoons at 4 o'clock, and our kids were faithful to come each week and do that. We got about 8 to 10 kids that are involved in our youth worship band. Got some others that I'm on the fringe that I hope we can get involved that I think can and should. Yeah. But now we practice on Wednesday nights after the service, and they stay for about an hour after everything's gone on. They're going to be there anyway, and so they're faithful to do that. And with that, we make sure to play songs, as the adult praise band does, that are theologically sound, that are built on the scriptures. And one of the ways that I've kind of made sure that that's the case is we play the same songs that we play downstairs. We don't select from any other list, because I know that I can trust the work that Jonathan and Randy and others have done to select those songs, and know that those are going to be songs that are going to uplift us and teach us each week. So they do that, and they work through that each week, and are putting together a product. It's not, it doesn't sound very spiritual. No. But they do a great job of putting together that each week to allow everybody else to come alongside them and worship. And really, it's so important to me, as Randy was talking about, creating leaders in our church. Our church has provided the resources that these kids need to be able to do that. They've given us space to do it on Sunday mornings from time to time and lead our whole congregation in worship. So again, our kids feel like they have some real buy-in to what we're doing here at the church, and this is their church too, as we talk about. But I was just reading, I'm taking a class right now, it's church revitalization and seminary stuff, and I was reading in a book about church replanting, and it was talking about the need for church replanting. But inside of that, what they did to establish that need was that there are dying churches all around the Southern Baptist Convention. That's unfortunate, but it's true.
Yep.
But one of the main reasons that they point to set up this need is they said that churches typically die because they don't hand over leadership to young people. We hold on too long to the leadership spots in the church, and we don't give any responsibility to the young people. And in our worship setting, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give them some responsibility. Not in a box. It's not somebody else giving it to you. You're taking ownership of it for the glory of the Lord and for the good of our church.
Right.
And so we do that in that setting. We do that in other settings. We have students lead small groups for us on Sunday nights, pretty regular. And we want to build them so that they become our next sets of care group leaders or
Right.
teachers,
Yep.
and our next set of Glory Kids leaders, and our next set of worship leaders. And so just another space that we can do that to make sure that's happening in a positive way in our church.
Yeah, that's really good. That's a good point. And, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about, our current praise team, the adult praise team. And, the majority of them were at one time in a youth praise band in their younger days, and they were able to, get those opportunities to lead worship and now here they are. And then you talked about, a couple of them that were with you guys, and now they're, implemented into our worship team. And so it's a cool thing to see that,
right.
So we do have a responsibility to, guide those folks, the next generations into those leadership roles. Well, kind of jumping off of that a little bit, we, as far as the youth goes, and again, we talked about this in a previous podcast, but y'all are really, really active. We have an active youth group, and Phil and Meg do a great job of keeping them, busy, not for busy's sake, but just providing opportunities, like Philip was saying, in different aspects. But like, I know one of the things, y'all, of course, there's fun things, that has to be done. But like, even in that, it's just the way you go out and, talk to people and conduct yourself. But then also, y'all have, service opportunities that y'all go out and do. Yeah. That's part of that worship experience and learning, about that as well. Yeah. And so that's very important. But anything else, that you wanted to kind of talk about, or?
Yeah. I've been hit lately, just how blessed we are, or certainly how blessed I am in this ministry to be able to have the support that we have from the church body, from our staff, to do the things that we get to do. Like I wake up 90% of my days and I say, I get to do this for a living. It's kind of crazy and wild. And, it's a gift every day. And so anytime I get a chance, especially with an audience like this, I want to make sure that that's known, because it's true, and so when I ask people to do random stuff like a love scavenger hunt, and you see a kid pushing a baby doll through a buggy through the frozen food aisle in Walmart, you just kind of turn your head and be like, all right, I trust Phil, this is going to be a good deal, So we appreciate that you let us do the silly things, that you support the things that we do for the spread of the gospel to our students and beyond. And we got another big opportunity for that coming up in about 2 months from now with our Disciple Now weekend. That's a whole church body event. And so we're looking forward to it. And so we'll be getting more details about that out soon too.
Okay, awesome. Well, Philip, thanks for being on the podcast today. And this is some good information. And, we're just excited to see what God is doing here at Glory through all age groups, from our kids all the way through our adults. There's just some amazing things going on, and some amazing growth spiritually. And so we're just excited to see what God is doing and what he's going to do, and very thankful for it. So we'll have one more podcast in this series of All About Worship. And so that will be coming out in a couple of weeks. And so then we'll move on to another theme as we go through kind of different aspects of what's happening at Glory. So thanks again for being with us. And again, if you do not have a church home, we invite you to Glory Fellowship on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30 and Wednesdays at 6 o'clock. Thanks for being with us.